adversaries. The bill is not perfect, and it does not resolve every issue. Like many of my colleagues, I am deeply concerned about the Trump family's potential conflicts of interest in using crypto to profit from the office of the presidency. That's why I voted for amendments to impose guardrails to stop elected officials from improperly profiting off the trades, and I will continue to push strongly for solutions to this problem. However, we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We stand at a critical moment where market structure is critical for our consumers, economy, and security, and the Clarity Act moves us meaningfully forward. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to expand for a minute on the important protections included in Clarity. The Clarity Act includes strong protections for the developers of software. Section 309 and 409 make it clear that neither the CFTC nor the SEC have the authority to require a person to register just because that person is developing, publishing, or distributing software. This is a critical protection rooted in our First Amendment that should be read expansively by the commissions. The creation of new decentralized finance protocols is also an important development that the Clarity Act seeks to protect. Both the CFTC and the SEC must carefully examine and understand DeFi, which is why we're requiring both commissions to undertake a robust study on the unique benefits and risks of DeFi. Through Clarity, Congress is making an unambiguous statement that DeFi is different and it should be treated differently from the centralized custodial intermediaries. Protecting this emerging technology is an essential purpose of the Clarity Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to recognize and yield to the gentleman from Indiana, a member of the Agriculture Committee, a member of the Commodity Markets, Digital Asset, and Rural Development Subcommittee, Mr. Mesmer, for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of the Clarity Act. America's innovative ecosystem has made our nation an investment magnet and development hub, but thus far our regulatory system has failed the digital assets industry. Under current framework, fraudsters go unpunished, consumers remain unprotected, and the best and brightest minds in the industry have picked up and left for other countries. The Clarity Act finally establishes distinct jurisdictional boundaries between the Securities Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, while also creating guardrails to incentivize and safeguard investment. The bill not only expands opportunities for Wall Street and Silicon Valley, it also provides great opportunities for Hoosier farmers by opening a new frontier for rural innovators and expanding access to capital in agricultural communities. The digital asset markets are in dire need of regulation, and the Clarity Act is the solution. I look forward to witnessing a new era of economic prosperity and technological advancement this bill will bring to America, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes of my time to the distinguished colleague from the state of Alabama, Mr. Figures.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have listened to many of my colleagues' views on the issues before us today, and I respect them all, and I respect their views. And I don't disagree with many of the points that my colleagues that are in opposition that they're making, especially as it relates to executive conflict of interest concerns. But here's what I know. I know that the United States is lagging behind the rest of the world in regulating this industry. I know that the regulations in the Clarity Act are better than none at all in this industry. And I know that consumers will be better protected the day after this goes into effect than they were the day before. Now, is there more work to be done? Absolutely. And we should do that. But we cannot allow subjective ideas of perfection to override what are objectively steps in the right direction. And so this act is one that I support, the Clarity Act. And this is an important first step. And as we move forward, however, we must continue to make the necessary investments so that everyone can participate. Those are investments in technical training and education so that people have the knowledge and skills to actually understand and participate in a digital economy. And this is also a time to commit ourselves to ensuring that we do not leave underserved and rural communities behind. I represent a district that is geographically predominantly rural. We still struggle with issues like not having access to the internet in many counties that I represent. You cannot participate in or leverage the benefits of a digital economy if you can't get on the internet. That is a fact. And so we must stand up for these communities and bring broadband and internet expansion resources to every community that we possibly can. And so let's keep moving forward. Let's keep making sure that we are bringing everyone along with us. And I urge my colleagues to support this. Thank you. I yield
Gentleman
back.
yields. Is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the gentleman that just spoke for his remarks concerning the need for broadband, high-speed broadband. And my pledge as the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, we're back in September, we've got Farm Bill 2.0, which includes rural economic development and rural broadband. And we have to get that done. I'm pleased to yield to the gentleman from Georgia, a co-sponsor of the Clarity Act, Mr. Carter, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to voice my support for the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act is a bill that will make clear laws to help better regulate digital assets and blockchain technology. This bill will ensure that future innovations in the financial world will happen here in the United States and not in foreign countries. We cannot allow our adversaries, such as China, to control the digital economy. The Clarity Act will help modernize financial laws to make innovation possible and clear up many opaque and sometimes contradictory laws. This bill delivers on President Trump's commitment to make the United States the crypto capital of the world, and I'm proud that we are paving the path towards American dominance in the digital future. Today, I again would like to give my support for the Clarity Act as it cements America as a hub for the world's financial innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you. I yield 2 minutes to my distinguished colleague from the state of New Jersey, Mr. Josh Gottheimer, who serves on the House Financial Services Committee.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairwoman Craig, for your excellent leadership. I rise in support of the bipartisan Clarity Act. This bill was made possible through a bipartisan effort that I was very proud to help lead with Chairman Hill and Congressman Stile. And it's an important one because 1/5 of Americans own crypto. My state, New Jersey, proportionally ranks second nationwide in ownership of cryptocurrency. But while cryptocurrency has tremendous economic potential, we desperately need rules of the road to protect consumers and to ensure the success of American entrepreneurs and ensure that America leads the way, not other nations around the world, but that America leads the way in this growing space. The Clarity Act takes common sense steps to make crypto work for everyday users, including measures to stop snake oil salesmen and fraudsters and hucksters, and puts Trump's family's coin under regulation. This legislation supports American-led innovation by encouraging developers and entrepreneurs to build, invest, and create jobs in our country. Finally, this bill gives clarity to the SEC and the CFTC's role in crypto to work together efficiently to crack down on scammers and criminal activity. And after years of uncertainty, it finally says who should oversee what so that people in this space understand the direction it's going in, understand who's going to oversee what, and that consumers can be protected. I can't say that enough. Do you want this to be the Wild West and continue to be with uncertainty, or do we want to have clear rules of the road to protect consumers? Do we want to do something or nothing? Is it perfect, as you've heard today? No, it's not perfect, but few pieces of legislation we bring here are. The question is, will it do good? Will it make sure that we look after people who are involved in this space? Will it ensure that America succeeds and grows? That's the question, and to do nothing means that we will ensure that Trump's coin has no oversight. Why would we want that? We will ensure that no consumer is protected if we do nothing. We want to protect American consumers. That's our job. This legislation does that. I urge my colleague to support this critical, common sense, bipartisan legislation. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, may I require how much time I have remaining?
Gentleman has 5.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentlewoman from Minnesota actually has 2. 2.5.
Mr. Speaker,
We'll give her
pleased to yield to the gentleman from Tennessee, the Vice Chair of the Commodity Markets, Digital Assets, and Rural Development Subcommittee, also a member of the House Financial Services Committee, a very busy man, Mr. Rose, for 1 minute.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Clarity Act, which provides long overdue updates aimed at protecting the future of digital assets, encouraging growth, and protecting American consumers. The days of stifling this emerging industry through litigation and rogue rulemaking must end. The Securities and Exchange Commission, under former Chair Gary Gensler, went far outside the agency's statutory mandate in many ways, especially with cryptocurrencies. The Clarity Act will strengthen transparency and accountability for consumers. It will require developers to provide accurate disclosures with details about the asset project's operation, ownership, and structure. It requires brokers and dealers to disclose important information to investors, to hold their own funds separate from their customers' funds, and to report any conflicts of interest. This bill ensures Americans know where they're putting their money, and it gets government out of the way of growth and innovation. Let's pass the Clarity Act for the good of this country. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers at the moment, and I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman Pennsylvania is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from South Dakota, the chairman of the Commodity Markets, Digital Assets, and Rural Development Subcommittee, Mr. Johnson, for 3 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's been such an honor to work with GT, French, Angie, Don, Brian, and so many others on something that's real. It's sometimes hard to separate the real from the fake in this town. That's certainly true for digital assets. NFTs, meme coins, these generate tremendous attention, and they can pull our gaze away from what really matters. Here's what matters. Blockchain technology, Web3, will transform every single industry in the same way that the internet has transformed every single industry over the last 30 years. And that transformation will happen much faster than people realize. If we can keep government from continuing to screw this up. This is not about buying bubble gum with Bitcoin. This is about blockchain innovation happening here rather than overseas, about more liquid capital markets, about small businesses creating new services and products, about removing friction from transactions for every single American, and about protecting consumers so the debacles like the FTX meltdown never happen again. We tend to overstate the impact of what we do in this town. Everything is historic, even when it's not. But this is different. This is huge. Before I came to Congress, I was in the broadband industry, and the 1996 Telecom Act provided the regulatory certainty needed to launch the internet era. That was a watershed victory for this country, and my friends, we are here again. The regulatory certainty provided by this incredible bipartisan work product will launch a golden age of innovation and the golden age of digital assets. Today, now, this moment, this is a watershed victory for this country. Today, we do something real. And with that, I would yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to close, yield myself the remainder of the time. I want to thank the gentleman from South Dakota for his remarks, and quite frankly, couldn't agree more. I also want to thank, again, my agriculture partner, Ranking Member Angie Craig with the Agriculture Committee, and Don Davis, and our leadership, and all those who are have the foresight to see that this is about the future. Well, it's about today, because there's companies that are struggling with this, but it's about more importantly the future of both the financial sector and the technological sector. And so a vote for clarity is a vote for America's future and America's leadership. And with that, I urge all my colleagues to vote yes on clarity. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, would like to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Chairman G.T. Thompson, and his team for working on this consumer protection legislation in a bipartisan manner. I believe bipartisan legislation is always preferable to partisan legislation. It's stronger, it's harder to undo when it has broad support and leadership changes. It's why I heard my chairman talk about the Farm Bill. I regret that it wasn't a bipartisan path through reconciliation for Farm Bill provisions, but I am optimistic that we can work together in many other areas. While I wait to see what the gentleman's got in store for us for farm programs left behind, I too agree that rural development is incredibly important, Mr. Speaker. I hope that the bipartisanship shown through the Clarity Act process can act as a reminder that we accomplish more and we go further when we work together. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields. All time for debate on the bill has expired. The chair understands that the amendment number 1 will not be offered. Pursuant to the rule, previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. Question is on engrossment and the third reading on the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to provide for a system of regulation of the offer and sale of digital commodities by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and for other purposes.
Question is on the passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Gentlelady requests the yeas and nays. They are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having arisen. Yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings of this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, good morning. Pursuant to House Resolution 580, I call up the bill S-1582 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title.
Senate 1582, an act to provide for the regulation of payment stablecoins and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 580, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services or their respective designees. The gentleman from Arkansas and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the Senate Genius Act, and I thank my colleague and longtime friend, Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, for his leadership in ushering this bipartisan bill through the United States Senate. Around the world, payment systems are undergoing an evolution. New technologies are modernizing legacy infrastructure and unlocking innovative solutions to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and expand access to financial services. Members of this House Financial Services Committee have long recognized the promise of payment stablecoins and have worked since 2022 to establish a legislative framework. Last Congress, under the leadership of former Chairman Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, the committee passed the Clarity for Payment Stablecoins Act of 2023. This bill provided for bank and non-bank pathways for issuers to obtain regulatory approval, preserve state-level oversight, and set standards for reserve composition, audits, and sound risk management. When the 119th Congress started in January, we picked up this effort. In close coordination with the Senate Banking Committee, and our base legislation and our legislative work over the past 2 years has laid that foundation for the progress made in both the House and the Senate. Today we have an opportunity to send stablecoin legislation to President Trump's desk. This is a multi-Congress priority item, and it ensures American competitiveness, strong guardrails for our consumers. We should not, Mr. Speaker, squander that opportunity. This priority has been agreed to by both President Biden with his executive order and President Trump in his executive order 14178. Through multiple versions of stablecoin legislation, the House and Senate have shared ideas and crafted workable approaches, and our joint efforts before us helped enhance the legislation on the floor this morning. I want to recognize the hard work of my friends in the Senate to get the core fundamentals of what payment stablecoin legislation demand. I also want to recognize the diligence and thoughtful work of my colleagues here in the House, including the chairman of our Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Artificial Subcommittee, Brian Stile, who championed and worked through our committee through markup in successfully designing, writing, and passing in committee the STABLE Act. I thank my House colleagues for their principled approach to key policies that guided and distinguished our effort, particularly around state regime oversight, the reserve composition, the anti-money laundering and territorial integrity issues around stablecoins, and finally the corporate structure of issuers. Furthermore, it's my firmly held belief that only by enacting payment stablecoin legislation and, Mr. Speaker, I repeat, and comprehensive market structure reform in this Congress, like we just debated a few minutes ago, the Clarity Act, only by passing both will this Congress fully usher in the era of digital finance and ensure that consumers are protected whenever they engage with digital assets. I urge all my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill and sending it forward to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for President Trump to sign into law, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume. 2 weeks ago, Republicans boasted about how they would provide billionaires with tax cuts they don't need by stripping health care from 17 million Americans, shuttering hospitals across the country, and starving 12 million families, including millions of children. These billionaires are the same individuals who proudly gave millions of dollars to President Trump's campaign, literally bought votes during the last election, and even sponsored Stalinist military parades to celebrate the president's birthday. No one should be surprised that these same Republicans' next order of business is to validate, legitimize, and endorse the Trump family's corruption and efforts to sell the White House to the highest bidder. SD 1582, the so-called Genius Act, establishes a woefully deficient federal framework for dollar-denominated payment stablecoins. In the United States, stablecoins are a form of digitized private money. Unlike other types of crypto, these coins claim to always maintain their value, often one coin for $1. Nevertheless, that promise of stability is precisely what causes stablecoins to be the subject to bank-like runs where the public rushes to sell their stablecoins at the first whiff of instability, making a bit of bad news into a full-blown financial crisis. It was for this reason that when I was chairwoman of the committee, I sought to create a federal framework to oversee these stablecoins and ensure that consumers are protected. I worked with the Biden administration and former Republican Chairman Patrick Henry to craft legislation. We achieved that goal, and I posted that legislation earlier this year. We wanted to create a strong federal system to oversee this type of crypto market that protected consumers, our national security, and financial stability. Unfortunately, the election of Donald Trump ended those bipartisan efforts and brought a significant new challenge to stablecoins. The Trump family's brazen corruption using crypto to sell access in exchange for official acts. And it just so happens that those stablecoins are one of the main vehicles Trump is using to make his corrupt crypto billions. The Trump family, crypto company, World Liberty Financial, launched a stablecoin called USD1 in April. And shortly after that, the Abu Dhabi-backed investment from MGX brought $2 billion of Trump's coin to make an investment in Binance, a company that had been under investigation for numerous legal violations. Trump and his family will make tens of millions of dollars just on that transaction alone, from the interest earnings alone. That's Abu Dhabi's money. More concerningly, by passing this bill, Congress will be telling the world that Congress is okay with corruption, okay with foreign companies buying influence, okay with criminals buying Trump coins to seek pardons and beneficial treatment. Surely, each of you can see how this is blatant conflict of interest, right? Well, Democrats and the rest of America does as well. It is why I introduced the Stop Trump in Crypto Act to ban the president, vice president, and members of Congress from crypto corruption. If we do not ban elected officials in S 1582, including the president or vice president, from crypto corruption, each of us will be complicit. And let me be clear on this point, because there's been a lot of misinformation. This bill has a policy statement that elected officials, like members of Congress and senators, as well as government officials, cannot issue their own stablecoins. But do you know who Republicans did not ban? Now get this straight. The president and the vice president, they're the only elected officials that can have a crypto business. Why are the Republicans protecting the president to make billions and billions more dollars? Don't just take my word for it. Earlier this week, Chairman Hill confirmed as much at the Rules Committee. Anyone who says that the bill stops the president's company from issuing stablecoins is not telling the truth. And yet, even if we adopted such a ban, the Genius Act, sent over by the Senate and apparently unable to be amended, is still bad public policy. S 1582 creates the appearance of a federal framework for stablecoins, but it does not provide the federal government with the full authority it needs to ensure that all stablecoin issuers comply with the law. The bill also creates risk for consumers who will be stuck in a lengthy bankruptcy process if a stablecoin ever fails. Additionally, it leaves the door open for foreign firms that present a major national security threat, including targets of sanctions all to appease those in the Trump family's inner circle, which has ties to those shady entities. Yes, I'm talking about Tether, the foreign stablecoin issue. Everyone knows has been used in terrorist financing, organized crime schemes, and other horrible acts, but which the Commerce Secretary, has close ties with. But let me give you one more example why this bill is just bad for America. The very heart of this bill is that stablecoins will, in fact, be stable because they will be backed one-to-one with solid, safe assets. But I invite anyone to read the bill. While some of the reserves are cash and short-term Treasury securities, this bill allows for uninsured deposits. We already know how dangerous these deposits are. When Silicon Valley Bank failed, Circle, the largest stablecoin today, had $3 billion locked up in uninsured deposits and needed the federal government to rescue it. But that isn't all. A stablecoin issuer is also permitted to hold Bitcoin as reserves. That's because someone added language in this bill late in the night in the process that added new definitions and language to the bill. The language allows for a stablecoin issuer to use any money received under repurchase agreements that are, quote, a means of exchange currently authorized or adopted by a foreign government. Do you know what Trump's favorite strongman, the dictator of El Salvador, adopted as a legal currency? Bitcoin. So this highly volatile cryptocurrency will now be eligible to be a reserve backing on your stablecoins. It is truly absurd and dangerous and will lead to consumers losing their money and the taxpayers being called on to bail out the financial system. It is for all of these reasons that I submitted several amendments to this bill, none of which were made in order by Republicans because the president has rejected any conflict of interest language that binds him. One interesting point is that even Chairman Hill himself inserted language at the end of the so-called Clarity Act that the House is separately considering this week that actually amends the Genius Act. You heard me right. Rather than amend the Genius Act, which our own chairman saw had problems, he put his changes at the end of the Clarity Act. You may be asking why he would do that. He could just offer his amendments to the Genius Act. The reason is House Republican leadership has given up our power as the United States House of Representatives to work the will of members on behalf of our constituents and make changes to any legislation that the Senate sends us. Instead, we're simply taking the language directly from the Senate with no amendments, even when the chairman and other House members know that this bill is flawed. Unfortunately, because President Trump demanded the bill be passed without any changes, that's what the Republican Congress will do. One of Chairman Hill's changes to the Genius Act addresses a key concern I've had from the beginning, which is that Facebook and any other big tech company should not be allowed to issue their own stablecoin. That would violate a long-standing separation of banking and commerce in financial regulation, and our chairman's amended language would have closed this loophole. Unfortunately, the Genius Act allows Elon Musk, X, to issue its own stablecoin and creates a pathway for Facebook to do the same. For these reasons and many more, I strongly oppose this bill. I yield back. I reserve the balance of my time.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. Yep. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to address a few of those points. One, I'm so delighted to hear it sounds as if my friend, the ranking member from California, in fact, will now vote for clarity this afternoon on the House floor, since she highlights some of my suggested changes to Genius. I appreciate her remarks on that. But here's the big picture, Mr. Speaker. These bills, Clarity and Genius, are about protecting American consumers, protecting investments, bringing capital back to the United States, making the U.S. a fintech leader in payments and in digital assets. Consumers are protected. The rules are straightforward. All issuers of a payment stablecoin are treated the same with high standards, high regulatory oversight. And so I want to make sure that those at home following on C-SPAN get the record straight. Let me yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, who for years has been a partner in crafting a digital assets approach that will make America more competitive. Mr. Thompson's recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to stand before you and support the Genius Act. It actually garnered 68 bipartisan votes in the Senate. I appreciate those senators. They demonstrated an awareness of the needs of the modern financial sector here in the United States. I congratulate Chairman Hill and Chairman Stile and thank them for their work on the stablecoin legislation. The Genius Act represents an important step for this Congress in establishing the United States as a leader in the digital asset space. This legislation, together with the market structure bill that we had previously considered, and for which I've had the honor of co-sponsoring with my colleagues on the Financial Services Committee, will provide an important safeguards around the utility of vital digital assets in the next generation of global finance. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to submit additional remarks for the record and to clarify congressional intent on the effect the bill may have on the ability to list certain derivatives products.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from California is
I now
recognized.
yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, who is also the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Artificial Intelligence.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I rise in strong opposition to the so-called Genius Act. Mr. Speaker, this bill has never even been considered or debated in the House Financial Services Committee or the Agricultural Committee, the committees of jurisdiction, which is the usual practice in this body. I guess this is what passes for genius these days. Republican leadership has once again caved into President Trump's demands for quickly pushing crypto legislation. President Trump just yesterday posted, "Pass the Genius Act ASAP." I guess there's no need to debate it or read it or amend it, just pass it. Now, you might think that Republicans might be cautious about taking financial policy direction from someone who has a side hustle selling baseball hats and Bibles and who has filed for bankruptcy 6 times in the past 20 years. But sadly, you would be mistaken. This bill significantly weakens the U.S. dollar, which is the global reserve currency and provides a huge competitive advantage for our country. This bill allows a complete takeover of our financial system by big tech companies, by allowing these massive companies to issue their own cryptocurrencies. For example, Google, with 3.5 billion daily users. Meta has over 2 billion active daily users, not to mention Amazon or X or Walmart. Several of these companies have already indicated they're planning to launch crypto stablecoins if this bill becomes law. And those companies can easily compel or incentivize users to move away from the dollar and away from traditional banks and into these so-called stablecoins. President Trump's own stablecoin is set to become one of the top 10 stablecoins after Abu Dhabi announced a $2 billion investment in World Liberty Financial, which is a joint venture between the Trump family, his sons, and Steve Witkoff and his family. You may recall that Steve Witkoff is Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, where Abu Dhabi is located. Nothing in this bill prevents the clear conflicts of interest and violations of ethics laws by President Trump. And the worst aspect of this bill is the danger and risk that it puts on the backs of the U.S. taxpayer, because this will not end well, and nothing in this bill prevents a taxpayer bailout of crypto. If we really wanted to protect the taxpayer, we could require that crypto companies that are pushing these bills absorb the losses if they fail. That would seem fair. Yet despite several attempts to have amendments included in the bill that would protect the taxpayer from paying for crypto bailouts, my Republican colleagues repeatedly refused. We've seen in the past, in 2008, when the last version of financial innovation blew up, collateral debt obligations and other complex derivatives. It was the taxpayer that had to pay to clean up that mess, to the tune of about $700 billion, while bankers who created the mess, they got bonuses. We should not let that happen again. And I urge my friends on the other side, my colleagues on our side, to defend the U.S. taxpayer and vote no on this bill.
Gentleman's time's expired.
And I yield back. I thank the gentleman.
The gentleman's reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I really have to say I believe the Genius Act is an important component for preserving and enhancing the United States dollar as the reserve currency around the world. I now want to yield 3 minutes to a gentleman who's been instrumental in our success in crafting digital asset legislation, our Majority Whip, Mr. Emmer of Minnesota.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In November, the American people elected the most pro-innovation, pro-crypto Congress and president in American history. Following his historic victory, President Trump gave Congress a mandate to pass landmark legislation creating rules of the road for the digital asset ecosystem. The Genius Act is the first step in fulfilling that promise. I would like to applaud my Senate colleagues, Chairman Scott, Senators Hagerty, Lummis, and Gillibrand, for energizing an often calcified Senate to send over the Genius Act. Furthermore, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Speaker Johnson and Leader Scalise, along with Chairman Hill and Chairman Thompson, for putting this bill on the House floor today for a vote. Fundamentally, any stablecoin bill is about national security. It's about preserving and extending the dollar's dominance as the world's reserve currency. People want to transact in dollars because we have the strongest and most reliable economy and government in the world. It's the currency the world counts on to do business, and the United States' global position relies on that status. The United States cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. If we fail to lead in this space, we risk leaving the door open for authoritarian regimes like China to advance its state-controlled digital currencies. This bill is a globally competitive regulatory framework for dollar-backed stablecoins, one that encourages domestic innovation and brings transaction volume back into the United States visibly and under our control. As we saw over the last 4 years under the Biden administration, regulation by enforcement not only created uncertainty, but also pushed companies offshore. A clear and defined stablecoin framework like that in the Genius Act keeps these innovators here at home and brings back all those who left. This is not a perfect bill, but it is a perfect bill for this moment. Congress must keep its eyes on the finish line and send the Genius Act to President Trump's desk this week. Bottom line, the Genius Act is a pro-innovation, pro-freedom, and pro-growth piece of legislation. It's a bipartisan solution to a global challenge, empowering U.S. markets to lead, not follow. Let's pass this bill and secure American financial leadership in the global digital economy. I encourage all my friends in this body to unequivocally vote yes on this bill, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman from Minnesota yields back.
I reserve.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, who is also the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Capital Markets.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
It is customary when we consider major legislation to give credit to those who created the bill. The ghost of Sam Bankman-Fried looms above this auditorium. He is the genius behind the Genius Act, and one can only hope that he's able to watch C-SPAN on a black and white television set in his prison cell. You don't have to be a genius to know that this bill is an attack on working families. That's why the AFL-CIO says no, and they are scoring it. They call it stablecoin. It's not stable. It's not a coin. It's a money market account that under this law must pay 0% interest. So who wants to forgo a 4% rate of return and get a 0% return in stablecoin? Those who are desperate for what cryptocurrency offers. Cryptocurrency literally means hidden money. And these stablecoins are exempt
from the anti-money laundering provisions. Thus, it meets the needs perfectly of drug dealers, human traffickers, sanctions evaders, those who are hiding assets from their former spouses, and tax evaders. And just to be clear, the Republicans rejected unanimously in committee a provision to prevent mixers. Mixers are devices whose sole purpose is to defeat even top law enforcement efforts pursuant to a warrant, and under this bill, the mixers will be used to defeat law enforcement. Republicans claim to be against crime in the streets, but they're creating a device whose sole purpose is to facilitate crime in the suites. Page 43 of this bill contains a provision maintaining the eligibility of stablecoins for bailouts under a facility created under Section 13.3 of the Federal Reserve Act. Now, Jay Powell won't bail out stablecoin, but the next guy will. Stablecoin marketers are going to tell investors that if they ever have a problem, they're going to get bailed out. And after all, crypto has all the power in Congress because it is the #1 source of super PAC independent expenditures. Last year, crypto did more super PAC expenditures than big oil and big pharma times 5. This bill is designed to enrich President Donald Trump. Even Richard Nixon never thought of printing up baskets of monopoly money and selling them for cash. Trump thought of it, and he's doing it electronically. Abu Dhabi has announced they're investing $2 billion in Trump's stablecoin. $2 billion in Trump's hands where he has to pay nothing, 0% on the loan. He invests the money, he makes $2 million a week up until Abu Dhabi demands its money back, which they're never going to do as long as our foreign policy meets the needs of Abu Dhabi. Republicans rejected unanimously an amendment to prevent taxpayer money from being used to buy
Gentleman's
crypto.
time has expired.
If you're voting for this bill, you're voting for taxpayer money to go into buying Trump coin. I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the President. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to recognize the chair of our subcommittee on digital assets, financial technology, artificial intelligence, who's crafted the STABLE Act, which is the base text that led to this joint good work between the House and Senate. Mr. Stile of Wisconsin.
The gentleman from
3 minutes.
Wisconsin is recognized.
I thank my good friend, the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Hill. I rise in support of the Genius Act. The legislation brings clarity, consumer protections, and American leadership to the evolving world of payment stablecoins. Stablecoin legislation has been in the works for over 4 years and has been called for by Democratic and Republican administrations. The status quo fails to protect consumers from fraud. That's an untenable situation in a market growing by the billions. For too long, the United States has operated without a clear federal framework for dollar-backed payment stablecoins, leaving consumers vulnerable to fraud, innovators in limbo, and our global competitiveness at risk. That's why I'm proud to have introduced stablecoin legislation in the House and worked alongside my colleagues in the Senate to make the legislation reaching the President's desk as strong as possible. That's why I'm urging a yes vote on the Genius Act. The bipartisan, bicameral legislation creates a robust framework for payment stablecoin issuance in the United States. It encourages the innovation and development of Web3 businesses here in the United States. It establishes clear rules to ensure that consumers are protected and businesses have clear regulations to responsibly participate in the digital asset ecosystem. By requiring issuers to maintain a one-to-one reserve in cash and high-quality liquid assets like U.S. Treasuries, consumers know what they're getting and are protected. Genius has strong anti-money laundering, operational risk, and governance standards in place to prevent abuse, reinforce market integrity, and create an even playing field with other financial institutions. By passing the Genius Act, the House will be sending it to the President's desk. Congress will be sending a clear message. The United States will dominate the future of financial innovation. We'll protect consumers, support innovation, and defend the central role of the U.S. dollar in global commerce. This bill, we're not just responding to a moment. We're building a foundation for the future of finance in the Web3 world. Payment stablecoin legislation is critical to this foundation.
If we want to become the digital asset hub of the world, we must enact a comprehensive framework for the digital asset ecosystem. I urge my colleagues to support both Genius and Clarity and send a message that America leads in financial innovation and does so with integrity, strength, and a firm commitment to protecting the people we serve. I yield back.
Gentleman from Wisconsin yields back. Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Costin, who is also the vice-ranking member of the Financial Services Committee.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I was to describe Jeffrey Epstein as a nice family man who works in finance, you might question why I was saying that. Well, if someone says that something that is neither a coin nor stable is a stable coin, you might question why they're saying that, because they aren't stable. Terra, which was a stable coin, collapsed to 30 cents and wiped out $40 billion in investor value. That was an algorithmic stable coin. More recently, as the ranking member has noted, USDC, a so-called stable coin, fell to 88 cents and only exists today because taxpayers bailed them out. These are some of the reasons why central bankers last week issued a warning that stablecoins threaten global financial stability and need a much more restrictive regime than traditional finance. The Genius Act ignores all those experts and instead ties stablecoins into our financial system, but without the safeguards that are required by banks and investment companies. As the ranking member noted, this allows big tech companies to issue stablecoins, amass consumer data, at the same time we're gutting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that protects consumers. It allows issuers to cherry pick the lightest touch regulator between the federal government and any of the 50 states. Rather than fixing the problems created when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, it makes them worse by saying that you can have uninsured deposits, but if there is a run on a future Silicon Valley Bank, the stablecoin issuers have a superior claim over every single person in this room who has a legitimate deposit in that bank. My colleagues have said this has a one-to-one requirement, except that that's not audited. There's only an audit requirement for companies over $50 billion in asset, which is only 2 stablecoins. So Donald Trump's stablecoin just has to say, I attest that there was value in here on the 30th day of the month, and you don't have an auditor. That ain't one-to-one certification. Finally, the Genius Act is a missed opportunity to limit foreign influence. We know that recently a convicted money launderer wrote the code so that the United Arab Emirates could buy $2 billion of Trump's stablecoin, which allowed President Trump to earn $30 million on the transaction. Now this convicted felon...
Gentleman's time's expired.
To the gentleman, additional
And I should clarify here, the convicted felon I'm referring to is the guy for insider trading.
Time's expired.
An additional 15 seconds to the gentleman.
The convicted felon I'm referring to is the guy who ran Binance, not the president, but he's seeking a presidential pardon. So the Genius Act sets the stage for an exponential crisis and allows the president to continue cheapening the office for his own financial gain, and I urge a strong no.
Are reminded, gentleman yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the Vice Chairman of our full committee, Mr. Heisinger of Michigan.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today is a good day for innovation. It's a good day for free markets, entrepreneurs, and consumer choice. It's a good day for American digital leadership. And Mr. Speaker, after years of debate, and frankly, as I was chair of the Capital Markets Subcommittee in 2017 and 2018, holding hearings on crypto assets, Congress has finally recognized the unique nature of stablecoin products. Under this bill, we established a regulatory framework that targets the activity, not the technology. And after years of indecision, Americans finally have an administration that is ready to embrace those products. The time to reassert American leadership in the digital asset space is now. The Genius Act acknowledges that stablecoins can address inefficiencies in the U.S. payment system. It acknowledges that maintaining the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency should always be at the forefront of any decision that we have. And it acknowledges that the private sector must lead the way, fostering innovation and competition. And finally, it acknowledges that a clear regulatory...
I yield the gentleman 15 more seconds.
Gentleman's got 50 more seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, at the end of this, finally, it acknowledges that a clear regulatory framework led by the United States is needed to usher in this modern technology. We're at an inflection point, folks. And when it comes to digital assets, I urge my colleagues to seize this moment by supporting this important legislation. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, who is also the ranking member of the Small Business Committee.
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, gentlelady, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the Genius Act. From the beginning, I have said Congress needs to tackle stablecoin legislation. But we cannot pretend this is happening in a vacuum. We are debating a framework for stablecoins while the President, his family, and members of his administration are personally invested in this market and directly profiting from it. 3 days before taking office, President Trump launched his own meme coin. When the coin's value collapsed, his insiders cashed out. Everyday investors were left holding the bag. It is estimated they lost over $2 billion, while the Trump circle walked away with more than $350 million. And now his family firm, World Liberty Financial, has launched its own stablecoin, once again netting the president's family tens of millions of dollars. The administration is rolling back enforcement and reshaping family policy to give this business interest a leg up. These are such clear-cut conflict of interest, and yet this bill does nothing to address them. It doesn't bar the president or cabinet officials from holding financial stakes in stablecoin issuers. It doesn't address the foreign investors piling into these ventures. It doesn't even try to draw a line between public office and private gain. This isn't a framework for innovation. It's a framework for more corruption. If we are serious about protecting consumers, about protecting our markets, we have to start with ethics. This bill fails that basic
The gentlewoman's
test.
time has
I urge
expired.
my colleagues to vote no.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill, the Genius Act, and the bill we debated a few minutes ago, the Clarity Act, are all about consumer protection. There are no rules federally across the board in the digital asset space at all now. That's why we've seen consumers hurt by the lack of a regulatory framework. And so I have to say, Mr. Speaker, in total contrast to my friends on the other side of the aisle, that's what we're all here for today. Now, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate your continuing reminder to the members in the chamber from engaging in personalities. But it has become a part of our morning routinely. So I have to inquire how long we're going to let this go on, Mr. Speaker. I want to make sure this chamber, all the members of the chamber, adhere to Rule 17. Mr. Speaker, I now call on the gentleman, our distinguished chairman of our subcommittee from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, who leads our subcommittee on financial institutions from Kentucky. Mr. Barr is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you.
Mr. Barr, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise today in strong support of the passage of the Genius Act, and I want to thank Chairman Hill for his extraordinary leadership, not just in this Congress, but for a long time advocating for this moment. He deserves a tremendous amount of credit for persevering and working and marshaling bipartisan, bicameral support. And I want to thank him for his terrific leadership. I want to thank the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, for being a subject matter expert and working in a bipartisan way to build a bipartisan coalition for this moment. And there's been a lot, Mr. Speaker, made in this term of Congress about the one big, beautiful bill. And it's a historic piece of legislation, no doubt, and it's going to supercharge our economy. It's jet fuel for our economy. It's tax cuts, the biggest tax cuts we've ever seen in this country's history. But I would argue, with all respect, that arguably the most important, most transformational piece of legislation in this Congress are these bills we're talking about here today, the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. It is paramount that we send this historic piece of legislation, the Genius Act, to the President's desk, because this bill is the first of its kind in creating a regulatory framework for the future for stablecoin issuance in the United States to revolutionize finance and payments in this country and around the globe. Not only will this cement us, the United States, for decades to come as leaders and innovators in the digital asset space, but it will protect, importantly, protect the U.S. dollar's dominance and increase demand in our treasury market. In the Genius Act, stablecoins become pegged to the U.S. dollar and backed by high-quality liquid assets. So, in stark contrast to what my friend, the gentleman from Illinois, was arguing, this actually prevents these other so-called stablecoins from actually thriving in the marketplace. That you're going to have stablecoins that actually are stable. That's why we need the bill. The gentleman is actually making the argument for us. The gentleman from Illinois. He's making the argument for why he should support the Genius Act because of non-stable stablecoins that are out there. Those products will lose ground in the marketplace after we pass the Genius Act. It will ensure that consumers are protected while reaping the benefits of blockchain technology. The Genius Act will allow for scalability to occur in the stablecoin marketplace, ensuring American consumers and businesses have access to this innovative product. Both banks and non-banks can issue stablecoins under the Genius Act, bringing together the best actors in both the traditional finance space and the new era of digital finance. The Genius Act provides that all appropriately regulated banks, including the U.S. Operations of foreign banking organizations, which are supervised by the Federal Reserve, are treated equally to their U.S. peers. This is particularly important with respect to the issuance, reserve, and custody services and bank capital requirements, irrespective of whether they are deposit insured, since the Act prohibits stablecoins from being covered by FDI insurance. A robust, well-regulated stablecoin market eliminates any justification for a government-controlled central bank digital currency, or CBDC, which jeopardizes Americans' access to freedom, privacy, and apolitical private capital. And this is an important point for all of my colleagues on my side of the aisle who share my concern and opposition to a CBDC. If you want to put a dagger in the heart of this crazy surveillance state idea of a central bank digital currency, pass this bill. Vote for this bill. Vote for the Genius Act, which will eliminate all arguments for a CBDC. So with the Genius Act, we will increase the speed and decrease the cost of payments. We will decrease and eliminate friction from our payment system. If all Americans see housing their deposits via a CBDC at the Federal Reserve as a risk-free proposition, they would be incentivized to pull their money out of...
I'll yield the gentleman 15 more seconds.
So just to conclude, we want to avoid eroding the deposit base and starving the private sector of conventional bank financing. So the Genius Act will not erode the deposit base, and it will allow banks to issue and custody stablecoins and participate in this emerging crypto economy, cementing the dollar as the world's reserve currency, protecting consumers in the deposit base, and supercharging the Treasury market. I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you very much. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davison, who is the Republican chairman of the National Security Subcommittee.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
I thank the ranking member. I have not seen a perfect bill since I've been in Congress, but this is a pretty good bill. It's an important bill. Regulating stablecoins is long overdue at the federal level. But make no mistake, stablecoins aren't new. The New York Department of Financial Services has regulated stablecoins in the state of New York since 2018. They're time-tested and proven, and they've been stable. It's long overdue for us to provide federal legal clarity here. So why am I speaking in opposition to it? Well, look, my Republican colleagues are exactly right about the stablecoins and the need for regulation. That's why we passed the Stable Act. But my Democratic colleagues are right this time to recognize that the legislative process is broken. And frankly, we all know that. Everyone in the House does. We've seen it broken on lots of things. But here today, we've got a defective product that our legislative process prevented us from fixing. On the product, the Genius Act, we agree. We've got 5 amendments that we want to do to the Genius Act that we're doing in clarity, and they're important. And frankly, while the Genius Act does address retail CBDC, and it's an important concession because Democrats want a surveillance state central bank digital currency. You're going to see that when we vote later on Tom Emmer's bill. They want that. Republicans are thankfully united in opposing central bank digital currency, but we should deal with that fully here. On March 8th of 2023, in a dialogue with Chairman Hill, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said that they would need congressional approval for a retail CBDC. But he went on to explain that you could have a layered CBDC, and they're building just that at the Federal Reserve. We should completely turn that off, and that's why we need to pass Emmer's bill. I'll talk about that later. But we also need to protect self-custody, which is the ability for you to move your money directly, person to person, without an intermediary. You won't have direct access to your own money unless you protect it, because government agencies continue to try to ban it, and we need to protect
Gentleman's
it.
time's expired.
We do in clarity, and that's why I oppose the bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the chairman of our Oversight Committee, Mr. Muser.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to rise today in strong support of S. 1582, the Genius Act. I want to thank the chairman of our full Financial Service Committee, Chairman Hill, for his leadership, Chairman Stile for his great work, and also Whip Emmer and so many on in our committee and our colleagues in the Senate for their work in this legislation. I also want to recognize President Trump's administration, crypto czar David Sachs, SEC Chair Paul Atkins, for their efforts to reverse the Biden-era irrational opposition and misguided regulations that we lived with for 4 years towards innovation, and now we are setting America back on a pro-growth, America-first course. Mr. Speaker, the Senate's legislation built on 2 years of groundwork by the House, crafting a framework for stable coins that protects consumers, the dollar, unleashes private sector innovation. This bill achieves 3 goals. It supports the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency, provides a private sector alternative to a government-run digital dollar, very important, and modernizes payments to reduce costs and expand access. This is smart, forward-looking policy.
Gentleman's time's
I urge my
expired.
colleagues to support, and I yield back.
I'll reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume. Since assuming office, President Trump has been making himself richer and richer while working-class Americans are struggling just to stay afloat. President Trump has earned $1.2 billion since he entered office. The Trump family has been using the office of the presidency and the way that they're doing this is extremely alarming to me and my fellow Democrats. Now, let me go through this timeline once more. In September of 2024, on the campaign trail, the Trump family launched World Liberty Financial, which they have described as a decentralized finance or DeFi company. On January 17th, 2 days before the presidential inauguration, President Donald Trump launched his Trump meme coin, and days later, Melania Trump launched her meme coin. On March 25th, 2025, World Liberty Financial launched a dollar-pegged stablecoin just 1 week before the House Financial Services Committee marked up stablecoin legislation, and 2 weeks after Senate colleagues held their markup. On March 31st, Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr.'s American data centers merged with American Bitcoin, a Bitcoin mining operation. On July 8th, Trump Media and Technology Group, the company that operates the Truth social media platform, announced that it had filed paperwork with the SEC to launch the crypto blue chip ETF later this year. Now let's add all of this up. Since January of this year, President Trump and his family have launched or planning to launch 6 different crypto ventures. 6. Congressional Republicans and the crypto industry will state that these conflicts of interest take away from the discussion on other parts of the bill. They claim that this bill is good for consumers and investors. Well, let me tell you, it is not. It is good for Trump's family and wealthy crypto investors. They can afford to see themselves through an FTX-type collapse. No one, not a Republican or a Democrat, should be using their office to make themselves richer while everyday Americans are struggling to buy groceries and pay for their health care. Everyday Americans are simply trying to survive thanks to Republican policies while President Trump and his billionaire boys club thrive in the economy. It's simple. If people want to know why members of Congress can't simply exclude the president and the vice president, why do they keep them in both of the bills as owners of crypto? Why did they avoid my amendment that would take them out? I don't believe that the president, the vice president, his cabinet, his family, or any members of Congress should be owners of crypto. And I certainly don't believe that the office of the presidency should be used by anybody, any president, now or in the future, to be the owners of crypto. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Flood, who chairs our subcommittee on housing and insurance.
The gentleman from Nebraska is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Hill. I've been working on this since I was in the Nebraska legislature. Back in 2021, I passed the Nebraska Financial Innovation Act, making our state the second state to allow state-chartered banks to custody digital assets, mostly stablecoins. These stablecoins have the ability to greatly increase not only the speed of payments and settlements, but to also make our economic system even more efficient. Stablecoins will also support the advancement of the U.S. dollar around the globe. We may often take it for granted, but most of the transactions around the globe rely on a currency backed by the U.S. dollar. That could change if we don't adopt laws like this. Who steps in? Adversaries like China. We want to have a presence on the continent of Africa. That is the next frontier. This assures us of that. In the early days, caution was certainly prudent. Stablecoins are a novel technology with significant questions regarding how to protect consumers, what happens in the event of a bankruptcy, how to ensure that the issuers live up to the technology's namesake by providing a truly stable asset, the dollar. That's why we've been working in our committee the last several years. Similarly, the Senate has been running through their process. Let me be clear, this bill is not perfect. With my experience in Nebraska, I have been a strident supporter of a strong, robust state pathway for issuers. This bill has a state pathway, but it's capped at $10 billion asset threshold. I personally much prefer Congressman Brian Stiles' Stable Act to this Senate product. However, despite my personal preferences, this bill absolutely provides a comprehensive and safe federal framework for stablecoin regulation. In order to usher in a new era of blockchain innovation, we need to pass the Genius Act so our regulators can get to work implementing a comprehensive stablecoin framework. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I request unanimous consent to enter the following letters from organizations who oppose this terrible bill. The AFL-CIO, who is scoring this vote. Americans for Financial Reform, who is leading 78 investor, consumer, religious, and civil rights groups and public citizens. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Without objection, the gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, a distinguished member on the House Financial Services Committee, Mr. Gottheimer.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in support of the Bipartisan Genius Act. This legislation builds on the bicameral negotiations that Chairman Hill, former Chairman McHenry, Chairman Stile, and I, and so many others have worked so hard on for the past years. The Genius Act is smart bipartisan legislation that backs stablecoins through U.S. dollar on a one-to-one basis and allows states to make future safeguards to further protect consumers. The Genius Act, as I said, protects consumers and gives clear rules of the road to allow America to lead the way in a space that is key to our economy. It cracks down on illicit finance, helps counter bad actors, and reinforces the global strength of the dollar, all while lowering the cost of payments and making transactions happen in just seconds. The bill has already passed the Senate in a strong bipartisan way. Now it's time for us to clarify rules for stablecoins, protect consumers, and promote American innovation. As I said before when we were talking about the Clarity Act, the question is, do you want some rules of the road or no rules of the road? To vote against this bill and to vote against the Clarity Act, it's irresponsible if you want to make sure that the Trump coin has oversight, that you want to make sure that the consumers are protected. I don't know, will the gentleman yield 15 more seconds?
15 more seconds.
And I just think it's critical to not pass this legislation is deeply irresponsible because it'll allow the Wild West to continue. This will protect consumers, ensure that the Trump coin and others have protection, are overseen with protection and oversight from the CFTC, from the SEC.
Expired.
It's critically important to protecting consumers and to protecting our country.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California, recognized.
Actually, let me just reiterate, it's irresponsible to turn this bill over to the President of the United States, and I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to yield 2 minutes to my friend, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to voice my support for Senate Bill 1582, the Genius Act of 2025, which will provide a clear regulatory framework for the issuance of stablecoins in the U.S. This bipartisan, industry-supported bill will finally give the stablecoin asset class clear rules of the road for the issuance and use of digital assets. The Genius Act will establish standards so issuers are credible and stablecoins are quality assets in a rapidly innovating digital market. I would like to thank the Senate for passing this bill and getting into the House so quickly. I encourage all my colleagues to vote in support of the Genius Act. It is a vital step in keeping America the pinnacle of financial innovation. Let's make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is
to reserve the balance
recognized.
of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves.
Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
from Arkansas.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindman.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
As Vice Ranking Member of the Commodity Markets, Digital Assets and Rural Development Subcommittee of the House Agriculture Committee, I rise today in support of both the Clarity and Genius Act. These bills aren't perfect, but digital innovation in our economy is critical to our economy, and I support a regulatory framework that protects consumers and the financial system. However, I am concerned the ability for certain officials to use these assets for self-enrichment at the highest levels of our government. These bills ensure members of Congress and many other government officials must abide by ethics rules that we expect from government officials, allowing the industry to innovate as it should. But 2 individuals are exempted, the President and Vice President. This is incredibly dangerous and undermines confidence in this important industry. It also further degrades the public trust in our government, especially at a time when that trust is already eroded by the President's refusal to release the Epstein files. We need to take important steps to establish a regulatory framework for digital assets to thrive and to restore public trust. We need action now, and I hope we can close these loopholes. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentleman from California is
I
recognized.
continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman continues to reserve her balance of her time.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Herodopoulos, our majority whip of the House Financial Services Committee.
The gentleman from the state of Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, we are showing that we can lead here in Washington, D.C., getting things done with the leadership of our president and our leadership here in the House, working together with the United States Senate. And it shows that we are offering that certainty and stability once again for our economy to make America first. We're going to make the dollar dominant once again, and we're going to lead on digital currency payments. So it will increase, of course, the demand for U.S. treasuries and move us towards that dominant position we need to have in the financial markets. And I applaud our chairman. As a new member of this committee, it has been wonderful to watch a person in action attempting to work with the other side, pushing through bipartisan legislation, and once again proving that Washington can work if we have leadership at the helm. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am prepared to close, and I yield to the ranking member if she's prepared for her closing remarks.
From California is recognized.
Thank you. I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close if the gentleman from Arkansas has no further speakers.
I yield to you.
All right.
I yield myself the
California's
balance of the time. Let me again reiterate. A vote for SB 1582 is a vote to give Trump the pen to write the rules that would put more money in his family's pocket. A vote to S 1582 is a vote for consumer harm. A vote for S 1582 is a vote to plant the seeds for the next financial crisis. A vote for S 1582 is a vote to endanger our national security. That is why I will be voting no on S 1582, the Genius Act, and I urge all other members to also vote no. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume in my closing, and I yield myself the remainder of my time.
The gentleman's recognized.
Let me start by saying that we're here on the floor. We've heard a vigorous debate about dollar-backed payment stablecoins. Our committee has worked under both Democratic leadership, under Mrs. Waters, and under Republican leadership to research this, talk about it, think about it, have hearings about it for over 5 years now. And we come to the House floor today with a bill before us that, while not perfect, is a good bill, as has been evidenced by our speakers on the floor. S 1582, the Genius Act, is a simple, bipartisan bill that's long overdue and is based on that bipartisan work in both chambers. Wow, we're actually legislating. We're seeing bills passed in both chambers. It's exciting for me to see the good work of my friend Chairman Tim Scott of the Banking Committee in leading a policy-driven effort to put America's financial leadership first. S 1582, as written by Bill Hagerty, does exactly that. And Mr. Speaker, 68 senators voted for this bill in the United States Senate. 68. A quote, cloture-proof margin is only 60. 68 senators came together, including 18 Democrats, who vigorously debated this bill, worked on this bill, improved this bill, modified it, and sent it to us in the House. Likewise, Chairman Stile here in the House worked with those senators on both sides of the aisle all along the way to take the ideas that we had here in the House and our markup and our Stable Act and improve Genius. So with this legislation today on a bipartisan basis, we're modernizing our financial infrastructure, streamlining transactions, lowering costs, expanding financial tools for everyday Americans. This is about putting American innovation first. It's about creating a future where innovation is met with clarity, not confusion, where American ingenuity is empowered, not stifled by an outdated, not fit-for-purpose regulatory regime. The Genius Act will help maintain U.S. global leadership in financial technology, digital innovation, the power of the reserve currency, the United States dollar, while reinforcing important consumer protections and critical regulatory oversight where it's needed most. This is common sense, forward-looking legislation that reminds me of the earliest days of this House chamber agreeing in 1996 not to tax or regulate the internet, but to tax and regulate how people use the internet. This is a keen example of that principles-based legislation. I urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support the Genius Act, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Pursuant to House Rule 580, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question on third reading of the bill, those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading. Read the
An
title.
act to provide for regulation of payment stablecoins and for other purposes.
The question on the passage of the bill, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
So what? Ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote of the yeas and nays will rise. If a sufficient number have risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, further proceedings of this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 580, I now call up H.R. 1919 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will read the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 66, H.R. 1919, a bill to amend the Federal Reserve Act to prohibit the Federal Reserve banks from offering certain products or services directly to an individual, to prohibit the use of central bank digital currency for monetary policy and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 580, the amendment in the nature of the substitute recommended by the Committee of Financial Services is printed in the bill, is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debated for 1 hour, equally divided by the controlling by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services or their respective designees. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Walters, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill.
I thank the Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I now rise and yield myself such time as I may consume in support of H.R. 1919. This bill has been before us before in this House chamber. We debated it in the last Congress. It's had the outstanding leadership, support, and advocacy by our majority whip here in the House, Mr. Tom Emmer of Minnesota, and I rise in strong support. At stake is a fundamental choice about the future of money in America, a choice between freedom or government control. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, put the government at the center of every financial transaction, monitoring, controlling, and possibly restricting how Americans could use their own hard-earned money. As American government-controlled digital dollar threatens to open the door to government overreach here at home. It would threaten individual privacy and stifle innovation by undermining progress that we've seen from private sector solutions like we just talked about on this House floor, privately issued U.S. dollar-backed payment stablecoins. That is a continuation of the evolution of the private sector guiding the expanse of our money, how we use our money to make payments. Formerly starting out with cash, we wrote checks, we used debit cards and ATM cards at the point of sale, we use credit cards, we can send money by wire transfer or by an electronic check. And so the private sector has innovated all along that continuum of financial technology, and that's why today we don't want the Fed to drive that, to potentially control it, to issue it, for individuals to bank at the Fed and be subject to these risks to privacy or surveillance. Let's stick with the approach of private sector solutions. We've already seen small glimpses of this possibility under the prior administration. House Financial Services Subcommittee Chair for Oversight and Investigations, Dan Muser of Pennsylvania, has been having a robust discussion about the debanking policies of the prior administration for politically disfavored industries. The capability for the government then to follow on and directly freeze or delete Americans' funds on a whim, it's not compatible with our values, with our cherished freedoms, or our way of life, or even the past approach to the evolution of payments in our country. Moreover, a government-run digital dollar would put the Federal Reserve potentially in direct competition with the private sector. Further, a CBDC would create unnecessary risks by consolidating financial power within the federal government, limiting choice and threatening the very innovation that made American financial markets the strongest in the world. For all these reasons, I'm thankful that consistently my friend, our colleague, Majority Whip Tom Emmer, has been leading the charge to prohibit the implementation of a U.S. central bank digital currency. And I thank him for the work he's done to elevate this issue in the Congress and bring this bill before us once again for a vote on this House floor. I hope all my colleagues can recognize that Article 1 determines how we issue money and how we value it, that that's a power of the Congress, and that we're not delegating it to the executive. We control that in Article 1. This bill says that you can't issue a CBDC without that specific, explicit authority and direction from the Congress. I urge all my colleagues to join me in supporting Mr. Emmer's bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume. Over the last hours, we heard arguments from the other side of the aisle that the United States must prioritize innovation. The Republican crypto bills we considered will create giant loopholes in our federal financial laws that put consumers and investors at risk in the name of innovation. These bills would increase the chance of another costly financial crisis like the one in 2008 that led to trillions of dollars of wealth being wiped out in the name of innovation. So it comes as no surprise to me. So if it comes as a surprise to me that the last bill we will debate would block any research, pilots, or consideration about how to digitize the U.S. dollar, it is the reason that I call H.R. 1919 the Anti-Innovation Act. Now, we've been discussing a lot about cryptocurrency. We've talked about two different acts, the Clarity Act, the Genius Act. We've talked about a lot of the intricacies of crypto. But the general public does not understand all of this because the big issuers, the big boys, literally kind of own all of the information. They're the issuers, et cetera, et cetera. It's time for the United States government to take charge. And our central bank must be involved in the study and the research so that we don't have issuing crypto or anything else without the federal government knowing and being in control. H.R. 1919 would immediately halt and prohibit the United States from any research and exploring the potential benefits of a central bank currency or CBDC. A central bank digital currency is essentially a digital version of the dollar issued by the federal government that uses crypto technology known as blockchain to record everything and everybody who owns tokens. Open it up, let's know who the big issuers are. There are two types of CBDCs, and this bill bans both of them. A retail CBDC is made available to consumers directly from the Federal Reserve or from a bank or other financial institutions. A wholesale CBDC is not available to the public, but only to the banks and other financial institutions. This bill would ban both this kind of CBDC. Now, when Republicans raise concerns about CBDCs, they're talking about retail CBDCs. But because they're so adverse to knowledge, adverse to studying things, they have no idea that their bill blocks research into other forms of digitizing the dollar that would truly cut costs for the people. For example, J.P. Morgan Chase has estimated that $100 billion could be saved in cross-border transactions every year if a wholesale CBDC is adopted. Now, earlier this week, in the Rules Committee, we heard Republicans claim that we need to weaken oversight of private crypto because doing so will help cross-border payments. So I would ask my colleagues across the aisle, why abandon any research into making the greenback ready for the future? The thing is, if this bill passes, the United States would be the only country in the world to ban any research in the world on CBDCs. What are you afraid of? Why don't you want the knowledge to be held and explained? 137 countries are racing ahead, some studying, others issuing their own CBDCs. The foreign currency markets are evolving, but Republicans want to stick their heads in the sand. Those 137 countries and currency unions represent 98% of the global GDP, and China is one of the front runners in the global race to implement a viable CBDC. And do you know why China is quickly rolling out its digital currency? It desperately wants to create an alternative to the U.S. dollar to determine the dominance of our currency. Mr. Speaker, America reaps great riches because our currency, the dollar, is the primacy currency used around the world for all sorts of trade, from sales of oil to commodities to financial contracts. One of those benefits is that when we take out a loan to buy a car, or use our credit cards, our interest rates are much lower than in other countries. Another benefit is that the United States can pressure bad actors from Iran to Russia to China by cutting off access to our financial system and the dollar using sanctions. But those same countries would love to replace the dollar with their currency or something else. One way China hopes to do this is to show that the dollar is an antiquated currency, whereas the Chinese currency is the future. It is so short-sighted to not even study how the dollar could be digitized, especially during the same week that Republicans want to let private companies create their own currency. And so it is very important for all of us to understand that if you want to be innovative, if you want innovation, you will study, you will understand, you will be able to explain. If you really want to protect the American dollar, you will not put your head in the sand. You would allow this research to go on to make sure that the American dollar stays strong, even in digital. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask unanimous consent that I could insert in the record the Congressional Budget Office estimate for this bill.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask our distinguished chair of our subcommittee on financial technology and digital assets and artificial intelligence, Mr. Stile of Wisconsin, to address this bill for 2.5 minutes.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I thank my friend Chairman Hill. I rise in strong support of the Anti-CBDC Surveillance Act, and I want to thank Whip Emmer for his leadership on this issue. He's actually one of the first in Congress to raise the alarm, and since then, the case has only grown stronger about the risks posed by U.S. CBDC. Mr. Speaker, the globe and the global economy is at a crossroads when it comes to digital payments. Jurisdictions around the world are upgrading their payment systems to be faster, to be cheaper, and cross-border. The payment sector is leading the way, including payment stablecoins, to enhance the payment rails. As the United States grapples with modernizing our own payment systems, we're confronted with a choice. Do we empower free market solutions that protect privacy, protect individual liberty, or do we centralize control over payments in the hands of the federal government? To me, Mr. Speaker, the choice is clear. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller has repeatedly warned that a CBDC is, quote, a solution in search of a problem. Yet nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, in 2022 Executive Order on Responsible Development of Digital Assets, President Biden sought to explore a U.S. central bank digital currency, placing, quote, the highest urgency on research and development efforts into the potential design and development options of a United States CBDC. But President Trump understands a CBDC's threat to American freedoms. In a January 2025 executive order, President Trump explicitly prohibited any federal agency from issuing or advancing a CBDC without direct congressional authorization. In a free society, Mr. Speaker, financial privacy and private property rights must be protected. The American economy thrives on choice, competition, and liberty, not on coercion and control. I urge members to support this bill in preserving liberty, protecting privacy, and ensuring the United States of America is a global leader in financial innovation. I yield back.
The gentleman from Wisconsin yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from California, you're recognized.
I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, who is also the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Artificial Intelligence. He knows more about digital assets than anybody on the opposite side of the aisle.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for her confidence and her time. I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 1919, the so-called Anti-CBDC Surveillance Act. At the expense of U.S. global economic leadership, this misguided legislation would prevent the Federal Reserve from issuing a central bank digital currency, also known as a CBDC. Unfortunately, the facts surrounding the development of CBDC has been obscured by disinformation, conspiracy theories, and extreme political ideology. Republicans and the crypto industry have made unfounded claims that a CBDC will be used as a surveillance tool by the federal government. Let's be clear about what a CBDC is. A publicly issued digital dollar that would be regulated by the Federal Reserve, an independent Federal Reserve that would have the full faith and backing of the U.S. government. A CBDC would serve as an alternative to existing forms of payment and will have benefits including instant payment settlement, provide a medium for cross-border transactions, and foster greater financial inclusion. And Congress could require that the architecture of a central bank digital currency not have surveillance capabilities. More than 130 countries are or have been studying, or they have launched their own government-backed digital currencies, including every major world power. Meanwhile, the U.S. remains far behind amid an increasingly and blatant misinformation campaign about the features of a digital currency. Let's talk about the EU. It is widely acknowledged that the EU has one of the most stringent data protection regimes and protection laws on the planet. They have strict data protections, number one, on the GDPR. They have access, so European citizens, EU citizens, have access to control of their personal data. They have the right to be forgotten, which would prevent data surveillance and surveillance of citizens. And they have strict penalties for companies that violate their personal data rights. The United States could have the same in a U.S. digital currency. There's a widening gap between the U.S. and its G7 peers, all of whom have far more advanced CBDC projects than the U.S. I'll go back to the EU. The EU is in the final stages of a pilot retail CBDC program already, so far ahead of us. They're going to capture the future if we adopt this bill. The U.S. government has always led the way in harnessing technology to promote innovation. Look at DARPA and NASA space programs, clear examples of what happens when the U.S. invests in research and development. While concerns about data privacy could be real, we have the ability to protect that data in any architecture that we adopt. It's counterintuitive that my colleagues would be raising concerns about data privacy while thousands of private companies are scooping up data every single day. Vote no on this bill. I yield back.
The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky, the chair of our House Financial Institutions Subcommittee, Mr. Barr.
Absolutely. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of my friend from Minnesota, Whip Emmer's bill, the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act, a bill I'm proud to co-sponsor. This bill would prohibit the Federal Reserve from issuing a central bank digital currency or a CBDC to anyone. Now, I don't think the Federal Reserve has the authority to do this. In fact, a cursory, simple review of the Federal Reserve Act shows that the Federal Reserve does not have the legal authority to issue a CBDC to individuals absent explicit authorizing legislation from Congress. The Supreme Court has also recognized Congress's power to coin money and regulate the value thereof, implicitly denying to the executive branch or to the Fed the ability to do this without congressional authority. That said, I think it's prudent to explicitly deprive the Fed of the authority to do this for a variety of reasons. As has been said, Americans' financial privacy is at stake here. And we should not try to compete with China by becoming more like China. The argument for a CBDC that, oh no, Beijing is doing this, we should do it too. Why on earth would we want to imitate, emulate, or copy Beijing's surveillance state authoritarianism? And to my friend on the other side of the aisle who just made the argument, oh, we're behind. The European Central Bank is doing this. When have we in this country, the United States of America, wanted to emulate Europe? This is America. We do it the American way, not the European way, not the Chinese way, not the communist socialist way. We do it the free enterprise way. We do it the limited government way. We do it the way to honor Americans' privacy through the Genius Act, through private stable coins. That's the way we should do it. That's the way we should lead in innovation. And so, yes, personal privacy is at stake. Surveillance of Americans' individual financial transactions through a CBDC does raise serious privacy concerns and concerns about government control and politicization of loans, online payments, credit scores, tax compliance, federal contracts, monetary policy, and the like. But in addition to these privacy concerns, a central bank digital currency would centralize Americans' finances, eroding the banking deposit base. That would decrease competition and choice. And this is a big concern that I have, that a CBDC would substantially decrease the availability of credit and increase the cost of financial services and products for consumers, destroying our conventional traditional banking system. Our banking system, in contrast to Europe, in contrast to China, is the envy of the world due to its free market principles, its dynamism, and its diversity. Banks of all different sizes serve customers, communities, businesses with all different needs. And capitalism promotes market demand, which incentivizes banks to offer products that fit the needs of their consumers at the best price possible. We don't want to eliminate that. We don't want to erode the deposit base with a CBDC. So I ask you, Mr. Speaker, would we truly want to lose the benefits of a diverse banking system that makes the U.S. the global leader in the financial system? Do we want to take actions to be more like China or Europe and decrease Americans' right to privacy? I went to the European Central Bank. I heard them lecture us about a CBDC, and it made me more convinced than ever that we don't want to be like Europe. The answer is we do not want to be like Europe. We do not want to be like the communists in Beijing. We must not disintermediate our banking system and allow for a creation of a CBDC. We must not threaten Americans' access to privacy. That's why I support this legislation and urge all my colleagues to do so as well. And if you really don't like a CBDC, to my Republican colleagues, vote for the Genius Act, which takes away all the arguments for it. I yield back.
Time's expired.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes, who is also the ranking member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence.
Thank you, ma'am. The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentle lady from California for this opportunity to speak, because this is one of the most ignorant things I have seen this House produce in a very, very long time. And it stuns me, frankly, that my good friends, Congressman Hill and Stile and Barr, are associating themselves with this bill. Let's be super clear about this. Nobody knows whether a CBDC is a good idea. A couple years ago, I wrote a white paper on CBDC, and I concluded that it's not clear. And the arguments for and against are being mooted today. Yes, it could be abused by an overwhelming executive. If we had a president that, for example, showed disdain for the Constitution, that was comfortable acting illegally, that wasn't comfortable with judicial rulings, it's hard for us to imagine that president, but this could be abused. It could be used for monetary policy, bad idea. It could be used for taxation, bad idea. It could also, by the way, be a trusted electronic currency for an unbanked population. It could be a way of supporting the primacy of the American dollar. I don't know. And the truth is that nobody on that side of the aisle or this side of the aisle knows either. But we're going to forbid any inquiry around this to figure out whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. We're going to say you can't even research it. Stunning definition of ignorance. Imagine if we had said electricity is scary 100 years ago. It can kill you. It's produced by burning coal, which is dangerous. So we're going to not research electricity or atomic power or the automobile. Tens of thousands of Americans die every year because of the automobile. We don't know, and the majority says, let's not learn, because they have some ideological fixation that, frankly, I don't understand. 200 years ago, the private sector, which my friends on the other side of the aisle hold up, had issued currency. It was called scrip. Companies and banks issued their own currency, and this country learned that that was a terrible idea, and that, in fact, the central bank should issue currency, which is one of the reasons we are who we are today. So you might give the CBD at least some benefit of the doubt instead of being ignorant about whether we want to know the truth. We need to stop this. We held this institution up for 2 days over a bizarre MAGA obsession which is rooted in insanity and ignorance. Don't even find out the answer. The ranking member said that this is, like a boy who is hiding from the truth. I have another metaphor. This is like a young 5-year-old who's angry and covers his eyes and ears and believes he's invisible. Imagine just my good friend Andy Barr saying, we're not like China, we're not like Europe. What if there's a sterling or
the gentleman's time has
I
expired.
yield to the gentleman an additional minute.
I thank the ranking member.
The gentleman is recognized.
For all the rah-rah patriotism, think about this. And again, I'll acknowledge that we don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, and we ought to find out. But let's imagine that the European Union, which Mr. Barr wants to dissociate with himself with, puts out a CBD that picks up real usage. Now all of a sudden we have a threat to the dollar because we're still handing around pieces of paper because the Republican majority said we shouldn't even research something that may or may not be a good part of a modern 21st century economy. Come on, guys. Don't go with ignorance. You're too smart for that. Don't risk putting us behind on something that could be really important to the future of the American dollar. Vote no on this ignorant bill. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, who is the chair of our National Security Subcommittee.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davidson, you are recognized.
Thank you so much. Central bank digital currency poses an existential threat to Western civilization. It's essentially, at its heart, communist banking. Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, and Democrats in the Senate didn't walk around Omarova to be confirmed as a bank regulator because they were opposed to communist banking. They won it. And that's what central bank digital currency is. Our colleagues on the other side of this debate act like we need to study communism a little harder to figure out whether it works or not. We've got plenty of evidence. It doesn't work. Central bank digital currency inserts government between you and your money. The government, another word for central bank digital currency is programmable money. Well, who does the programming? The central bank. They can condition your access to your own money with whatever parameters they put in place. They can filter transactions. They can even set them to expire. And monetary policy wonks in the communist banking world think this is a feature, not a flaw. They think that if they could set your access to your money to expire, that it would be a better future. Every dystopian fiction that I have found, Brave New World, 1984, says this is the future of money, that it's corrupted into a tool for surveillance, coercion, and control. And frankly, our own current banking systems crept too close to that. We need to turn the other direction. And the market's telling us that. That's why cryptocurrency was invented, frankly. That's why it's so popular and it's a growing asset class. We need to say no to this, and we need to protect what the market is telling us consumers want. And we tested this under the Biden administration. They decided that they were going to spy on your bank accounts if you had $600 in your bank. And the public said, whoa, what? Why are you spying on my bank account? And in a communist world, they say, well, if you have nothing to hide, then why should you have anything to fear? But that's not our way of life in this country. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say that. It says if you have probable cause, and only then you get a warrant. Here, you build in the surveillance into the program. And look, I get it. If all men were angels, this would never be abused, but we know they're not. We've seen massive abuse in our own country, but in Canada, we saw Trudeau, a fellow traveler on the communist long march, want to ban people's access to their own bank accounts because they were protesting his COVID policies at trucker rallies. This is very easy to do when you have programmable money. We need to say no to this. It is an existential threat to our way of life, and ideally we would do it at every opportunity. I urge all our colleagues to vote for Mr. Emmer's bill and stop this threat to our way of life. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, who is also the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Capital Markets.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
I worked hard in school, but the grade I'm proudest of is to be the first member of this House to get an F from the crypto industry. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution says that it's the federal government and Congress who should coin money and determine the value thereof. But our Republican friends tell us that that means that the federal government should be stuck with 1776 technology while the competitors of the dollar race forward in the 21st century. The largest super PAC expenditures in history occurred last year. The crypto industry spent more on independent expenditures. Take a look at this. You combine all of the expenditures from big oil plus big pharma, put them together, multiply by 5, and you still don't have what the crypto industry did last year. And so it's not surprising that we hear words like freedom, innovation, choice, and competitiveness used to justify making money for the crypto bros, and now we have a bill designed to prevent freedom, innovation, choice, and competitiveness when it poses a risk to their profits. This bill not only prevents us from ever having a digital dollar, it prevents us from even studying a digital dollar. Now, I think Americans will always have banks, credit cards, debit cards, Zelle, Venmo, cash, money market funds, and pursuant to the bill that it looks like we're going to pass today, they'll have stablecoin, a privacy device specifically designed for criminals and tax evaders. And then they'll have mixers to make it impossible for even the most advanced law enforcement, even with a warrant, to find out what's happening. So they have all those choices. What's the one choice you're not allowed to have? You're not allowed to have the currency provided for in the U.S. Constitution. You're not allowed to have a digital dollar or even a study of a digital dollar. You're not allowed to, if you don't want to carry a lot of paper around, you can't have the full faith and credit of the United States. Now, we've talked about the role of the U.S. dollar and the critical role that it plays in international transactions and why that is a major economic benefit to the United States. The crypto bros occasionally tell you out loud what they're thinking, and that is they want to minimize and destroy the role of the U.S. dollar internationally. So what do they do to hobble the dollar? They say the Chinese Communist Party can have a digital yuan. The Bitcoin bros can have a digital currency. But America is limited to 7076 technology. Our banking system is the envy of the world because we innovate. This bill says no innovation. I'll ask for another minute.
I beg your pardon? I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I'm sorry, additional minute for the gentleman, Mr. Sherman.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 additional minute.
Look, you might think it's hypocritical that they tell us we have to have crypto because otherwise China will do it. Then they say we can't have a digital dollar because China is doing it. That's not inconsistent. They are consistent. Their consistent rule is you must do what makes profit for the crypto bros, including Donald Trump, and you must prevent them from facing any competition, even the competition called for by the U.S. Constitution. Today's bills in whole, all three of them, will create a payment system designed for tax evaders and criminals. It will provide for taxpayer bailouts, and it will allow the crypto industry to say we've got all this power in Congress. Crypto bailouts are not only allowed, they're guaranteed. It'll provide an avenue for foreign interest to provide hidden money. Cryptocurrency literally means hidden money, into Trump's personal pocket, and is designed to allow taxpayer money to be used to buy Bitcoin and Trump coin. And finally, it takes our freedom, and it says you can have freedom to have a digital currency only if you do it in a way that enriches the crypto bros.
Expired.
No
the
choice
gentleman's time
for Americans
has expired.
who want a digital dollar. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank the Speaker. I want to have the pleasure to introduce the author of this important legislation and yield 4.5 minutes to the Majority Whip of the U.S. House of Representatives, Mr. Emmer of Minnesota.
Thank you, sir. The whip is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After much debate, we can now codify President Trump's effort to prevent the development of a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, and ensure that the United States digital currency policy remains in the hands of the American people and not the administrative state. I'm proud to have my legislation, the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act, being considered on the House floor for a vote today. This bill is straightforward. It prevents unelected Washington bureaucrats from creating a financial surveillance tool that, if not done correctly, will fundamentally alter the lives of every American. Unlike decentralized digital assets, a CBDC is a digital form of sovereign currency that is designed, issued,